The other thing I want to kind of preface is people always say like, I want a conscious partner. I'm like, are you sure? Because conscious just means you're aware of your own stuff, which means there's more stuff to work through and process. Now, how you relate to that work is everything. I used to be like, oh, conflict is bad. This means, I'm going to be left or whatever. Now I'm like, conflict is opportunity. I'm going to learn something about myself, my partner, and what we're building together.
All right, I am here with Alexi Panos. She is basically a superwoman, a super mom. She's everything. And every time I see her, she's glowing and smiling from ear to ear. I don't think I've ever seen her upset. I'm sure she did. I haven't seen it. And I am just so inspired by her. She has 2 books, Now or Never, and also 50 Ways to Yay. And I just want to deep dive with her about how did you get here? How did you get here?
Well, it's like so many long stories and they all weave together, right? I feel like every single one of my experiences brought me to this now moment. But the seed that was planted in personal development and actualization and just really like the curiosity around what it takes to be a human was planted around 8 years old. And I'll never forget, my parents were split. My mom lived about 8 hours away. So we'd do these road trips on her weekends. And she would always listen to like Tony Robbins and Marianne Williamson and Wayne Dyer. And so that was just like programming my subconscious, even though I was mad that it wasn't Madonna or Janet Jackson or whatever at the time. But I remember when I was about 10, 11 years old and I started to really like find trouble with who am I and try and fit in. I just had a really tough time feeling like I could relate to people. And I remembered that wisdom, and books became my friends. So it was like they kind of taught me and raised me in some way, and it just followed me ever since. But there were ups and downs and struggles, but truthfully, like the long of the short, I thought significance was going to come in fame and money and success, and I chased that. And I got it in multiple ways, and it wasn't it.
It didn't bring you happiness.
No, it brought me all the things, right, which is great, but it's almost more lonelier when you have all the things and you don't actually feel satiated. And so it was like that lack of satiation that really had me go even deeper and go, well, there's got to be something even more than just success. So then it was like, well, who am I? What is my soul? What does that soul want, that spirit want? So.
And how was it being raised? Because I don't think I've ever talked about this with anyone before, but being in a family situation where your parents are split, like how do you feel like that affected who you are today?
It's interesting. I mean, it's everything in how I am today. My parents, I never knew them together because they split when I was 4. So I've only ever known the 2 of them as separate entities.
So you don't remember how they split, or wasn't a big fight that you can remember?
Not that I remember, but they did fight pretty much my whole childhood. So there's a lot of chaos, and it was a lot of drama. It was like one parent pitting against the other parent, and there were custody battles. It was very messy. And I really became kind of like this peacemaker and was like, I'm going to choose the middle ground. I'm going to be like Sweden and Switzerland and just be like straight down the middle. I'm choosing no sides. But it also had me create these patterns and these defense mechanisms to really avoid conflict because conflict was bad. And conflict meant that a parent that they're going to leave you, abandonment, like all these like little things. So when I got into relationship, especially my relationship with my husband, who's more fiery, when that fire came out, I would instantly shut down. So through my relationship with Preston, I've really been able to heal with his help that part of my wounded personality, which has been huge. But yeah, the separation, it really just, it allowed me to see that there were 2 different ways. My parents are very different. It taught me compassion. It taught me understanding. It taught me patience. It taught me a lot of things that I didn't want to do when it came to speaking of other people. And it also taught, like, they both have incredible work ethic and are
Right.
so brilliant and creative and entrepreneurs. So they both taught me how to be really self-sufficient and independent and be a powerhouse as well.
Amazing.
So,
but how do you deal with the pain? Because I feel like, you're successful, and I feel like there's so many people out there that can have that same success
Yeah.
if they could get beyond the pain,
Yeah.
or as I say, turn that pain into power. So at what point, it sounds like you were very intuitive as a child, but was there any pain? And if so, how did you turn that pain into power? How did you make that pain work for you?
yeah, well, truthfully, I went to work. Like, work was my outlet. Curiosity was my outlet. Creativity was my outlet. And as an adult, I can see that I was in a lot of pain as a child, but as a child, I didn't necessarily experience or allow myself to feel it, guess as my like safety mechanism. So I really just channeled all of that energy into discovering who I was and being curious about the world and other humans. And perhaps that was my inclination to want to understand people
Right.
even more. I was like, I couldn't understand my parents, and I couldn't really understand why they hated each other so much. So maybe if I could understand people, I could somehow make that work.
Right. So now do you understand why they don't like each other?
Yeah, and we've all grown a lot since then. So now my parents can be in the same room and everything's all good, but they went through their own power struggle and their own dynamics and their own healing throughout
Right.
that time. So I definitely feel like I totally get what was underneath that. They were both madly in love with each other but couldn't figure it out. And so then they blamed each other for why it didn't work. And that blame got carried into year after year after year, so it only got bigger. Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
So what tips would you give someone who is kind of in it and they're like, this is painful, my parents aren't together, I feel torn between the two?
Yeah.
What, I guess, 3 tips would you give them to be able to, come into their own and really focus on their work like you did?
Well, if it's your parents, it's their journey, right? And I think the biggest thing is we, especially as children, can take things really personally. Like, it must be something I did, or maybe I'm not enough of this or that. So number one, it's not personal. It's their own journey. It's their own dharma to kind of work out.
Right.
Number two, be an open ear and be the example. Like, sometimes, and I know this now being a mom, my son is my teacher, and he's so just tapped into his love space because he doesn't know anything different and the world hasn't changed him yet. So he's my reminder of what's possible for me when I'm maybe not in my love space as much, right? So be the example. And third, I would say, really ask yourself, like, where can I channel this energy? The frustration, the fear, the upset, the unknown of I don't know what's going to happen next or what to do with this. How can you channel that? For some people, it's creativity. For some people, it's activity. Maybe it's movement or dance or sport. Whatever it is, find a way to channel that energy so that energy doesn't stay pent up in the body and it can be expressed.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. And now I want to talk a little bit about your relationship with Preston.
Yes.
You all are a power couple. # relationship goals. So can you just kind of share, like, what it took to get to that point? Because I know it's not all unicorns and rainbows. If you kind of share, I know you can't share everything because you have your personal stuff, but what you can share about the hard times and how one can really get through that to have a healthy relationship.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are hard times, and I think that's the biggest thing I want to highlight. # relationship goals on Instagram, everything looks great because obviously we're sharing some of our favorite moments together, which happen to be some of our best moments.
Right.
But behind that, what got us to those great moments are some really difficult ones, and some ones where we both wanted to walk away multiple times, where it was like, screw this is too hard. And what was too hard was facing off with our own stuff, our own wounds. And we happen to, marry someone who happens to trigger us. Welcome to relationships, right? And I feel, my personal belief is we attract people that are here for our deepest healing. And Preston is the perfect example of my deepest healing. He represents a lot of aspects of myself that I've either disowned or made bad or made wrong, or represent my father or my mother. And same for me with him. So of course we're gonna have things that bump up against each other, but those are our opportunities. So the other thing I want to kind of preface is people always say, like, I want a conscious partner, conscious coupling, it's like the thing. I'm like, are you sure? Because Conscious just means you're aware of your own stuff.
Right.
Which means there's more stuff to work through and process. Now, how you relate to that work is everything. I used to be like, oh, conflict is bad. This means, I'm going to be left or whatever. Now I'm like, conflict is opportunity. I'm going to learn something about myself, my partner, and what we're building together.
Right.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I think that's really important too, because there's so much divorce going on. It's like, okay, we don't agree, so divorce, bye. And it's just, and I feel like the couples that I do see that are together, they're like, okay, we go through this stuff, but the difference for my parents, I remember they got into the biggest argument, and then my mom was like, I want a divorce. And my dad was like, I'm never leaving you.
Wow.
And so
you saw this.
I saw that. I heard it. And so that was powerful for me, because I realized that, and also maybe challenging, because I'm like, I need a relationship where I can say I'm not leaving ever. So maybe I look at that too intensely, but I like how you say you just got to do the work and kind of work with each other, because every couple that I've seen, my grandparents included, my parents included, they go through things and they're just like, we're just not giving up. Like going away and separating is not an option.
Well, and I love that, right? And I think that's exactly what we're missing in today's world, not just in relationship with our intimate partners, but in commitment and relationship to anything in our lives. Right? Like, we're so quick to just be like, oh, no, we're done with you. It's that consumeristic mentality of like, oh, one and done, I'm out. Right. Like, you're not new anymore. You're not sparkly anymore. So I need something else. And we're seeing that pattern in our consumption habits. And we're also seeing it in commitment with ideas and our work. And we're also seeing it with commitment with people. It's just like fly-by-night society where no one's digging their heels in and actually seeing what they're made of.
That's a good point. So this is the question. When you're frustrated and you're like, I want to give up, bye, I'm out. We need space. We need space. What do you think is a key thing that brings you back to, okay, I want to work? I mean, no, I know when you decide to work, that's the good part, but what kind of can get you back? If someone's like, you know what, I separated from my person and absolutely over, they're a great person, but I'm tired of all this conflict, I'm tired of feeling bad, like, what's the bring back?
Well, the biggest thing is in the moment, especially if that's happening, human beings biologically, we actually have a reaction that happens where we get flooded. So we have this chemical cocktail that comes up, all of our defense mechanisms come up, all of our conditioned tendencies come up, and our rational brain shuts down. So it's really important to know that scientifically, if you're in it, in the moment, you are not thinking rationally. So that's like, as soon as you catch yourself, like, spouting words at your partner or they're spouting words at you, call a timeout. That's like the number one thing. Timeout.
Okay,
20 minutes. I need 20 minutes.
Out.
That's it. 20 minutes. And it actually takes 20 to 25 minutes for your body to reset fully, for your heart to recalibrate, for your nervous system to calm down. Then you can start processing and taking it up into the mind, but the body's got to be ready first. So that's huge. Take a break. Take an exit. Now, on that break, you cannot be stewing over what they just did and like writing notes in your phone, like, I'm going to write down what you just said so I can throw it back on.
Or record it. You remember you said this? So that's not healthy.
No, that's not going to work.
Okay.
So in those 20 minutes, I literally take out my notes and I say, what is under this? Because there's always an answer for that question. What's under this for me? Not for my partner. It's not my turn to diagnose him or say what's wrong with him or what he needs to look at. What do I need to look at? What's actually coming up? Maybe it's I feel unsafe, or maybe it's I feel like I want to be heard, or I'm missing you and this is my way of getting attention, right? And we really get to like lean in and get real and get honest about what's missing for us. Because it's always us, right? It is always us. Our partner just happens to like throw a little lighter fluid on the fire, but the fire's ours.
I love that. And I think a lot of people don't really, it took me a long time to realize that, that taking responsibility for your own emotions. And huge. I think that's huge. So can you give people different ways? Writing notes, I think, is a good one. Maybe 2 different ways that they can kind of take responsibility. And where did you learn it? I learned it in A Course in Miracles. Okay. But where did you learn about taking responsibility and how?
First time I would say was probably Tony, because I did Tony's work. I read his books, and then at 16 I went to Unleash the Power Within, or Awaken the Giant. UPW, Unleash the Power Within. Yes. Yeah, so I went to that at 16, and that was like the implementation and integration of all the stuff I read. So he talked about it quite a bit. But then I really got to practice it in landmark education, which I did at 18. And and went through that curriculum. And honestly, like, even though I knew,
Mm-hmm.
in the middle of things, I was not always taking responsibility for myself.
Right,
Like,
right.
I don't know about you, but I had the distinction.
Well, I think it's an ongoing process.
Sure,
Like, I feel like
course.
any time that you allow yourself to get frustrated, which happens, that it is about taking that personal, that's almost like a key to me. Okay, I need to step back and take personal responsibility for my emotions and find out where I'm hurting and where I need to heal.
Yes.
You know,
yes.
and those are just trigger. Like, anything outside of love to me is a trigger of something that I need to process emotionally.
100%. And I think we have so many opportunities to process that when we get into intimate partnership.
Right.
Because it's the place where we feel most vulnerable. It's the place where we want to feel the most held and seen and loved and accepted. And if anything tinkers with that, it tinkers with our value and our worth if we haven't fully integrated that worth within ourselves yet.
Right.
So it's like so many opportunities to clear. And it's beautiful.
I love that. And I kind of want to talk about, I talked to Preston about it, so I want to talk to you about how is it possible? Because you got the relationship goals, okay, work on it. But now you're doing business together too. And I know some people like never do business with your partner. It takes their romance out. And how do you navigate that playing field?
What's interesting is, like, as you said that, my dad's second marriage, they were in business together. My mom and my dad were in business together.
Wow.
And it didn't work out well. And so I had the story, never go into business with your partner because it ruins it. And so I really had to face off with a lot of that. And truthfully, we had a lot of opportunities to do that because we're so different in so many ways, and we do work differently. I show up very much one way and he's very much the opposite, which is why it works really well sometimes, and it complements each other, and it's explosive, but it's also why it can be explosive in other ways. Right. So what we did, and what really supported us after having a couple fumbles along the way, was recognizing that we needed to have clearly defined roles. Like, okay, this is what I do. I'm not going to expect you to do that, because that's not your strength. I do this. Mine. Yours.
It's just like, this is your side of the bathroom, this is mine. So what would be some of the clearly defined roles, if you can share?
Yeah, so for instance, communication in terms of like making phone calls and reaching out to other members of our team, that's Preston all day, because I'm actually not near my phone a lot. Everybody who knows me that I do not return phone calls or emails, just because I'm like committed to living my real life and not being on tech. And Preston is okay with that. He's like, I'm cool, I got a good relationship with it, all good. So people reach out to him. Not my job. However, my job is curriculum and structures and I guess what you would call more of the systems and admin of how a business works. That's more me. And then we both come together in the trainer and facilitator role.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, which has its own challenges as well. Even within that, like when we first started leading our workshops together, we were both trying to be everything. You know, it was like, oh, I want to be like this type of teacher and then really good at this. And we found ourselves comparing ourselves to each other, like especially in the room when one of us would get like better feedback from the audience or our students. It's like, oh, maybe I need to be more like that, right? But it was really about like leaning in and going, okay, what is my strength? And I found my strength was a lot quieter than Preston's. And I had to learn to be okay with that and stop making myself wrong for not looking like what he looks like sometimes in the training rooms. And I had to start validating myself. Like, this is more than enough. This actually brings a whole different world to our rooms that's necessary. When he's going here, I can go here, and it's really powerful.
That's really important. And I think that a lot of times, you know, some, you know, feminists or women would say, like, why can't you be the loud one? Because you are very loud and buoyant. And, you know, he is too. So do you feel like at one point you were both loud and there had to be a choice that was made? And how do you feel like you made that choice?
Yeah, I think, honestly, both of us are leaning into what integration and mastery looks like in our own facilitation skills. So at one point it was like, oh, I'm this and this is my strength, let me play into that. And we both kind of took our roles. But now I think as we're maturing as facilitators, we're recognizing that there's a time and place. Right? So he's leaning more into his softness and his like silence and stillness as a facilitator, whereas I'm leaning more into my fire. And now we're utilizing it based on the moment and really listening in the moment based on what's needed in the room.
I love that. So it shifts and changes basically.
Always, yeah. And even like our roles, Preston would have this section, I would have this section. But if he's on fire and I know that we're both here committed to our students' highest growth and they're getting it right now and it's landing, go for it, babe. Knock it out the park, land this plane.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge maturity.
Huge.
That's beautiful because it's all about the end goal instead of me shining.
Right.
Or at a certain time, it's about the people really getting what they came for. I think that's so beautiful.
It's
and I signed up for your relationship course. I can't wait for it. I'm excited about it.
I can't wait.
And so I wanted to talk a little bit about you being a mom. I mean, what? With all this going on, a lot of people feel like they have to give up their career and surrender to motherhood. Yeah. So can you kind of deep dive on your thoughts around motherhood and entrepreneurship?
Well, I had all those stories, first of all, which I didn't even know. I didn't even know they were there until I got pregnant. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I have all these stories around like, I'm going to lose my career, I'm going to lose my relationship. And it was society kind of speaking into my subconscious. And I had to become aware of that first. Right. And I didn't really become aware until I started feeling these like anxieties and fears around it. And I'm like, okay, well, what's under this? What's this about? And that helped me unpack and go, okay, I don't choose that. I don't choose that. What do I choose motherhood to look like for me? What do I choose partnerhood and partnership and parenthood to look like for us? And we got to really consciously and deliberately design what that looked like. And it's been really cool because we're doing a lot of the things that a lot of people think are crazy. Like our son's already been to 6 different countries and has his little passport picture as like a 3-month-old, and people are like, you can't travel with your kid and you can't do this and you should do this. And we're just saying, screw that. We're going to do what feels good for us and our family. And so that's kind of like set the foundation for me to really feel empowered as a mom to do what feels good for me, what feels good for my son and my husband and my family in general. And I will say that motherhood has like, so good. It has blown the roof open on everything for me. Like everything.
So was it just like bliss, like the whole 9 months, or was it hard for you?
I loved being pregnant. Like, loved it.
So you'd do it again?
Yes, we're attempting to do it again as we speak. So
nice.
we'll see what's in the cards for us. But we love being parents, and I loved being pregnant. I do recognize that every pregnancy is different. So I could have a really challenging one, and I'm available for that if that's what's required. But I recognize, again, even pregnancy, like, do I want to make this hard or do I want to really enjoy this? This is my time making a human being. Right. Like, ooh, let me like dig in and
superpower.
Enjoy this. Yeah.
That's amazing.
For real. And it really it allowed me to really test those parts of myself that wanted to go into kind of the allowed and socially accepted victimhood ways of motherhood. Like, yes, I'm tired. Right. Yes, I don't sleep as much as I'd like to. Yes, I had sickness. Yes, I had all these things that happened. I was bedridden for a couple weeks towards the end of my pregnancy. Like, I had things that happened.
What happened there where you had to be bedridden?
So I have apparently a vascular cervix, which means I've got a lot of blood vessels on my cervix. And I had one that like popped during one of the like pregnancy checkups. Right. So I started bleeding a few days later, and that's obviously not a great sign when you're pregnant. Right. So they didn't know what it was. I spent 2 nights in the hospital, and that was a whole different thing. Like, everyone was poking at me, and I'm just bleeding. I'm losing so much blood. But they're like, okay, the baby's heartbeat's fine, but you're losing too much blood. We can't let you go home. And so I literally had to lay with my legs up for like 2 weeks, which was that was like the hardest thing. They're like, just watch TV. I'm like, I don't watch TV.
Oh no!
I'm like, you're telling the wrong person to watch TV.
Did they just bring you a book?
So I read books. I did end up finding this one show called Episodes, which was hilarious, and watched the whole thing. But I read and I tried to make the most of it, but it was hard.
And so did you ever come out before you delivered, or you just ended up staying the rest of the time?
Yeah, so I came out. I was only in the hospital for 2 nights, but then at home, bedridden for 2 weeks. Okay. And ended up delivering safely at home, in like the comforts of my own home. But my whole family was like, you shouldn't deliver at home, especially with this, this thing. What if something happens? You could bleed to death. And like all this fear, all of it was just being projected. And I started to feel it. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to trust my body. I've got my backup OB if we need to. We're ready to go to the hospital if we need to. We're ready. Right. Like, my body's ready. My body knows. I'll know. And so that was a huge experiment in trust as well.
So what are the things that you recommend to help people, release some of that fear? Because everyone online will tell you what to do. Everyone in the hospital will tell you what to do. So what helped you just really, because I think everyone wants to be like, no, I got this.
Yeah.
But in the moment, that fear is real.
It's huge, and honestly, it's honoring it, and I spoke a lot of it to Preston, and we had a very open dialogue, and once a week we have our relationship check-ins, and I would say, hey babe, I'm actually afraid, like, what if I bleed to death at home? Like, what if I'm giving birth and this blood vessel pops open again and I bleed to death? Like, that's coming up for me. And he's like, well, okay, let's talk about this. Like, what plans can we have in place? So even just speaking it and like pulling it out and looking at it is so helpful, because it just dissipates the energy. The more I hold on to it or ignore it or stuff it down, it just builds and builds and builds. What we resist persists. And that's beautiful. So true. And so for me, it was, I literally shut off the world's advice. Anytime someone's like, hey, you should, I'm like, thank you so much. I know this is coming from the best place and you want me to have a really great pregnancy, but I'm actually choosing to like be with my own experience. So I would say that to people. I didn't read books, which is very abnormal for me, because normally I'm like prepared and researched and studied. I read nothing, because I was like, well, women have been doing this for centuries, right? And it's about listening to your body. And I'm good up here. I'm so good with like finding my way around the mental maze of humanity. What if I actually just checked in? Like, what if I listened to my body's wisdom and let that guide me? And that was a huge, beautiful lesson that still to this day I'm like leaning into even more. Like listening, truly listening to my body. So going within is what really helped you throughout your entire pregnancy. Yeah. And speaking the fear. Yes. Like really communicating and not leaving it bottled up. Because I think that's really important, because when you're hurting, when you're bleeding, these things happen. I think some people are like, oh, it must be normal, it's okay. Yeah. But I think that's such a good tip for you to like tell someone, especially your partner, like what's going on. So even if you are making a stay-at-home decision, you have like backup plans and things so that you're ready for anything. Yeah, and I shared it with my midwives and my birth practitioners, and I said, like, here's my fears. What do you guys have in place to help me mitigate that if that does happen? So it was really good. I felt complete. Like, it's like, all right, I'm good. If the worst case scenario happens, I'll be okay. So it was really just like checking in with that. Right. But, and health-wise, like I know, you're not a nutritionist necessarily, but you are really healthy and you put really healthy things. So what are some of the things you did health-wise to kind of prepare yourself for this time? Well, actually, I did so much, like so much. Prior to even getting pregnant, Preston and I both really wanted to commit to being in the peak state of health in our bodies. And so what that initially looked like was getting all the tests done. Right. Like we did all of them. Right. Like stool samples, heavy metal testing, hormones, adrenals, everything. So we spent about a month doing every single test under the sun with a naturopathic doctor, got our results back, and I found out I was in full-blown adrenal collapse, which was crazy because I felt amazing. Wow. Which was nuts. This is so common as well. I'm glad you're sharing this. Like I was like, what? Me? Right. I'm like on fire, smiling, feel good, so much energy. Right. And my practitioner was like, if I didn't know you and knew the work you did, just looking at your charts, I would think you were like clinically depressed and in bed. She's like, you have no adrenals. They've been stealing from your hormones, so your hormones are completely flatlined. Like you just have like you're bottoming out on everything. Wow. It was crazy. And seeing the actual numbers on the test result on the scale, I was like this far away from the skull and bones, which means you basically die. And I was like, wow. What? And it was just a huge wake-up call, because here I was eating all the right things, right? Doing all the surface things. Did you drink coffee? I drank coffee, but not a lot, maybe like 2-3 times a week, 1 glass, right. Not a ton. Didn't really eat anything with like high levels of caffeine. So it was just like, this is interesting, but I had to look at my lifestyle. And I've always been a go, like, because I have so much energy that it's like I'm a driver. Right. And I've never made that wrong, and not necessarily that it was wrong in this moment, but that was contributing to what was going on. And she said, if you want to get pregnant, like anytime soon, something's got to change. And so she literally prescribed like self-care days. She's like, you need to just go walk on the beach. And I was like, and do nothing? She's like, yes.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, all right. So it's like, here I was doing all the superficial things, but it was really the inner stuff that I need to focus on, which story of our lives, right? It's always the inner stuff that needs the most attention. And self-care had to become a priority. And sure enough, we did some natural supplements and different things, but self-care became huge for me. So it just shifted my entire business. And within 3 to 4 months, we got pregnant right away. And it was so funny. It happened literally. We're like, it was May, and we're like, we are going to become nomadic, right? Because we're like, we've been traveling, we're barely home, we're paying all this rent for what? And we have too much stuff anyway. So we're like, let's get rid of 90% of our stuff and just hit the road and go.
Right.
So we had all these plans. We're going to be here and here and here. And then sure enough, we got rid of all of our stuff. Went down to San Diego for our first stop to spend some time with some friends. Got pregnant within the first 2 weeks of becoming nomadic because we finally had space in our lives.
You created space.
Created space, got pregnant right away, and it was like, okay, we're going to be nomadic and pregnant. Great. And it wasn't until somebody said to me at like 6 months pregnant, I think I was in Australia, they're like, oh, are you going to do home or hospital birth? I said, home birth. They're like, well, where are you going to do it? And I was like, oh yeah, we don't have a home.
Oh my goodness.
Like, we should probably figure that out. So then we came back to Venice and figured it out.
That's amazing. Such a beautiful story. And I think the most important thing is, like you said, listening to your body and just surrendering, to the journey of it all and trusting your own intuition. I think a lot of us reach outside of ourselves for the answer. Yes. We really need to deep dive within. Yeah. So I guess, you're at home. Yeah. You're having this baby at home. You're going through it for the first time. Yeah. So, and what happens to your company? Do you take time off? Do you shift it? Because you're a mamapreneur, now.
Sure
So what did you do during this portion of your time?
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting. The last 3 months of my pregnancy, I really spent kind of restructuring the business. So I had the choice. Right. It wasn't like I'm going to take 3 months off. It was, I want the choice to be able to. So I hired some people. I made sure I had enough content built out for my membership site. I was just prepared. Sure enough, about 3 to 4 weeks after giving birth, I was really missing being of service in that way. So I jumped in about 4 hours a week, and it felt really good. I felt like I was nourishing my mission and also nourishing my new family. So I kind of got the best of both worlds. But setting myself up for success to be able to have that choice was huge. And I worked my ass off to be able to get to that point. Right. Literally to the day he was born, I was like hustling and moving things around. Are you good? Are you sure you got this? Okay, here's the SOP to do that. Okay, great.
Right. But that's awesome.
You do what you got to do.
Yeah. That's really, really crazy. Awesome. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about like sisterhood. Yeah. Because we've started like our groups together where we're really supporting each other. And I know that means a lot to you. So can you kind of talk about, because a lot of times online it's all about comparison and competition and, just kind of speak to that and what you see going out there and how you view other women. Yeah, well, for the longest time, I had such a hard time relating to other women and really feeling like I could trust the situation with other women, because I had had situations when I was younger where women that I did welcome into my life, things would happen, right? Whatever it was. But as I've matured and as I've kind of done the work on myself, I've recognized that my community has begun to look a lot different. And I have these extraordinary women who have shown up in my life that I'm so grateful for. And I just noticed this like paradigm in the world where it's like, I'm doing my thing. Great, let's just do our thing and like not really come together because we're all kind of up to the same thing in life. Right? Like my community, at least, we're all up to a bigger vision. Right. We're all wanting to serve. We're all wanting to use our gifts. So why not come together and say, hey, let's lock arms. Let's do this thing. Like, I'm not successful if you're not successful, because we're all up to the same thing. Right. So let's amplify our success. Let's amplify our reach, our message, our mission by coming together and utilizing our talents and sharing those. So it's shown up in so many different ways. Our group, where we're supporting other women and flying women out to LA to work with us, which is so exciting. It's showing up in like content creation, where I used to be so attached to like, this is my idea and like it's got to be under my thing, and now I'm like, let's do content creation days where we all shoot content and we can all share it on our platforms. And I'm really getting that the collective vision
when we come together and go back to that village mentality, everything works so much better, and it's way more easier and it's way more fun. You know, it's like I've been doing stuff by myself for so long, and then now with my husband for the last 5 years, but I missed my sisters. I missed having women to really like rely on and lean on and fall apart with and cheer each other on. It's like women are powerful, and I feel like the more we come together and really come back to the way things have been done forever, like women have been gathering for centuries, and we've become so separate from that. And I think the more we come back to that old paradigm, the more we realize like, there was a reason why this worked. There was a reason why they did this, because it really supports. And even going back to the whole motherhood thing, people say, well, how do you do motherhood and run multiple businesses and a nonprofit? It's because I have support. Because I have my village, and I consciously created that village to have my back so that I could have their back, so that we can do more together. I'm not trying to do this by myself. I'm not trying to be super woman with a cape and I'm the only one. It's super women, right? And the only reason I'm super is because I've got people cheering me on and having my back along the way.
That's so huge. But I also know that when I first started, and I've always been like, I'm 2911, like I love working in corporation, but there was a time where I was growing and I was reaching out, and you know, no one was interested. So kind of like, what do you have to say to that? Like when someone's out there like, okay, I want to work with other women, and they're reaching out and they're just getting the door shut in their face, like time and time again.
Which I totally get. I was there too. I'm like, hey, nope, okay, great. So I get that. And honestly, I just think of when I was that woman, when I wasn't ready for collaboration, it was because I was still being with my own scarcity. I was still in my conversation of there's not enough for all of us. Like, I got to get my piece of the pie and take care of myself. And then once I get enough, then I'll let you in. So what I'll say is don't take it personally. That's their journey. That's their unfolding. And they're not your people at this time. You guys may come together later when you're both at a particular point, and it might fly or it might not. But there are women out there who are ready, who are saying, yes, this sounds so good. I want that. I want my sisterhood. I want to lock arms. Those are the women that you look for. And I think it's less about like, what can you do for me? Like, what do you bring to the table? Because even in our group, we have different women with different followings. And, but they all bring something really unique and beautiful to the table. And that's what our commitment was, is we wanted to make sure every single person in this group could stand in her own power and be abundant and share from that power, and also welcome people in. You know, and it was less about the amount of followers and like how many emails you have on your list and all that. And it's like, are you a good person? Like, do we want to hang out with each other?
Do we want to have dinner together? I mean, that dinner we had was so great. It was so beautiful to be around other entrepreneurs, successful, intuitive, beautiful women, and not just on the outside, not just on the exterior, but internally beautiful, and having deeper conversations about the work that we want to do in the world. So there's one thing that I like to ask all the guests, and that is, how do you get loved up? So how do you love yourself, love others, and love the planet?
What a great question. I would say, I mean, there's so many ways, but the biggest way is spaciousness. Like, I cannot be present with somebody else if I've got 1,000 things happening here. I cannot be present for myself if I've got 1,000 things happening here. So I really have to give myself permission to feel the spaciousness of my life, no matter how much is on my plate. Because sometimes my plate is really full, and by the looks of it, it doesn't look spacious. But I can always take a step back, breathe, and change my focus and my attention on how amazing life is. What a miracle it is that I'm alive at this day and age for me to create what I'm here to create. Like, oh, what a blessing. That gives me the spaciousness to go, okay, so now what do you choose to do with this moment?
That's so beautiful. Yay. So awesome. And we do this little thing at the end. We make a little heart with our hands, and we toss it towards the camera. Until next time, get loved up. Woo. Hey.